What's happening today, everybody? This is Brandon coming to you, hanging out here at the front of my my other shop that I got going on here, fly fishing and knife business here. But I do have some of my art hanging out front. So I painted another dog this week. There's one of my other dog paintings there. My dog Lego that I have hanging on the wall here is kind of my advertising piece. But I painted another dog this week, and it was a little bit of a challenge on this one because I had multiple source images. I'm going to pop up the actual photo of the one that I went with in terms of the dog itself for the painting. But I did have multiple images of this dog, and it had different, and I don't know how well that is going to come through for you, but some of these pictures, that dog's fur was very light in color. Some other images I had under some different light, much darker, creamier look to it. I went back and forth on this one several times trying to get the coloration of this dog's hair the way I wanted to. So you're going to see in this video, I'm going to do a time lapse of it, show you my process of this dog. If you want to give this a look, let's have a go at it right now. Alright, it is that time again for another dog portrait, and so what I've got here is a 16 by 20 canvas that I'm going to be doing a full body dog portrait on. So like I do on all of my dog portraits, I have started here with a little pencil sketch of the dog. So I'm going to pop up the photo. This is Lily. Lily's kind of a well-known mascot, face of the business, so to speak, at a local pet resort spa, they call it there. It's like a doggy daycare place kind of thing going on. So anyway, we're going to paint this dog here, and I'm going to put a background in of just a dark color fade. I'm thinking like a dark bluish, kind of a slate blue gray color that fades from about this point up to a little lighter shade of that same color. And then underneath, I'm just going to do something that looks kind of like maybe a wood floor. I mean, I don't know what it'll be. I'm going to put something underneath here that's kind of a wood colored thing that this dog is sitting on, just because I personally don't want the dog to look like it's floating in the middle of a canvas. So I'm going to put something underneath the dog's feet that it's sitting on. Color faded to the back. Since the Lily's mostly a lighter colored dog, creamish color hair, I'm going to put a darker shade back there so her fur will pop and everything on it. So I'm going to use larger brush to begin with, just to get some coverage back here on this background, and put some color in, and we will go from there. So I'm starting here putting in my blue color for the background, and my thought process at this point was to fade this blue from the bottom where it's darker to a little lighter shade as it goes up towards the top of the painting. And I really wasn't sure how dark I wanted to go with it, but I just started with a basic layer of it here to let it dry, and as it's drying, I am putting the wood color that I wanted to go with underneath the dog here. I thought I wanted to go with a darker kind of wood color, maybe leaning towards the gray side of things. And then as it dries, I move back up into my blue, and I start darkening things up here a bit and creating that fade that I was looking for. So that's all I'm really doing here, is trying to fade that background color from darker blue to lighter blue. And then again, as that starts to dry, I move back down to my wood floor here, and I'm darkening it up a bit. I wanted it to be a little darker than what you saw there. This dog is a fairly light colored dog, so I wanted my background to be darker so that the dog's fur and everything would pop on it. Now at this point, my exposure on my camera somehow got bumped up to where everything is way too bright and washed out. You can still see what I'm doing here along this flooring on the wood, where I'm bringing in some different shades here, and now I am drawing my lines with some cardboard. That's my separation between the wood floor here, and then coming back in with just darker and lighter tones here that are creating what looks like wood grain. Now as I start with this dog here, again, the exposure on my camera was way too washed out and bright, so you can't really see. You can see what I'm doing now, just bringing in the nose and the ears and the face a little bit with these darker shades that are going to be my shadow colors. Now what I'm doing here is really just bringing in all the darker tones of gray and brown that are going to be all the shadows behind the fur, and you can't really see it again because of the exposure of the camera, but that's about to be changed here in just a minute and you'll be able to see what I've been doing. Right now, unfortunately, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on, but I'm putting all the darker values in. Once I get the dog mostly blocked in though here, I realize that I'm not real happy with my blue background. So here I am bringing in black gesso and I cover all of my blue up and make it completely a black background. Which brings us to getting the camera exposure fixed. And now you can see here is what you were missing. So there's all my dark shadows. All the tones that I brought in, just basically grays with some black in the darker areas and some browns in the areas where the dog's fur looked like it had some more creamy brown coloration. So I'm trying to bring in all the darker shadows and tones first. That way my lighter highlights when I start painting the hair and the fur will actually show up and be visible, which is the process that I like. I like to put the darker stuff in first and then come back over it with the lighter colors. Now this particular dog was a little bit tricky for me. I was using one main source image, which you've seen. Now here you see me starting to bring in some of the lighter fur color. The problem was I had multiple source images of this dog, and several of the other photos, the dog's hair was different lengths where it had been cut and groomed in some places, and really every photo I had, the fur looked to be a different color to me. So I was having some hard times figuring out exactly the coloration I wanted to go with on this dog. It looked like ultimately that the dog had shorter hair that was darker, almost a tan, creamy color hair, but as the hair got longer, the tips of the hair especially would start to really lighten up and lean towards a whiter coloration to them. So it takes me a couple of passes here of laying this fur in and this hair in to where I determine it after this pass that everything is just a little too white in color, and the dog definitely doesn't really look that way to me. So once I put all this in, you're going to see me go through some layers of changing the color up a little bit, in which I bring in some glaze of a lighter, creamier color over top of this. But for now, I am painting fur detail on top of my shadows and trying to make it to where it looks like, you know, you've got longer, curlier hair in some places along the belly of the dog, along the bottom, and then you can see some individual hairs here along these ears and the tops of the head that I'm trying to bring in. And it's just a process, you know. I bring in the lighter color on top of the dark and work back and forth with it until I'm happy with it. Right now, though, I'm still working with mostly a gray to white mix, and then so now at this point around the face, I'm starting to bring in a little bit of that creamier color that's visible along the cheeks of the dog and between the eyes and around the chin. And again, just working my process of lighter colors on top of the dark. And again, this was really a trial and error one for me on this dog, because like I said, I got to a point where I wasn't happy with the coloration of the fur and the hair of the dog after this first pass. And so I go back and forth on this one 2 or 3 times really before I arrive at a point that I ultimately end with. So right now I'm just trying to fill out the rest of the hair and the fur to make the dog look complete at this point. So continuing to layer in on top of my dark shadows to make the hair look fuller, to fill everything in. And now I'm zooming in on face detail here. I'm just basically trying to work along the eyes a little bit and the nose. And you know, the dog's eyes are not really that visible on this dog. They're kind of dark and inset a little bit, so I didn't worry too much about the eye detail other than just a little bit of a shimmer there to see the eyeballs itself. One of the features of this dog that's kind of known for is it does show you its teeth a lot. Kind of has a little bit of a grin to it, so I wanted to make those teeth visible here on this portrait, just like the dog is kind of one of its characteristics that its personality is known for. And now you can see me laying in a little bit of individual hairs here, detail along these ears and top of the face with a liner brush, bringing in some individual brush strokes to make those visible, and some in front of the eyes that are visible there, and also now along the nose where it's trimmed and groomed here around the face. This is again just part of the process of layering in lighter colors on top of my darker shadows to make them visible. I'm just doing this detail with a liner brush here at this point. Now I'm back realizing that I need to change up the color of this dog a little bit, so I am basically creating a glaze here where I've thinned out some creamier color, and I'm basically painting it right over the top of that more gray to white color base that I had. Just trying to change the tone of the fur a little bit on this dog. Like I said, this one definitely was a bit of a challenge for me to get the color right, so I really had to go back and forth on this one a couple of times when I realized that dog was just too much on the white side of things. Just everything was a little too washed out. And then basically start the process back over as I bring in some darker tones and shades of that creamier color and some darker grays back in, and then work my light color right back over the top. So I had to go back and forth with this process several times. And really I'm working most of this now on this fur detail with a small angled brush that I've been using that's a little bit worn out, a little bit frayed along the edges. And I get a good fur texture with it. I also use this particular brush to do a lot of my bird paintings. If you've seen those, I get a lot of good feather texture from it, fur texture with it. And it's just a worn out, about a 1/4 inch angled brush that I use for this. And so I'm laying in my lighter hair and fur detail again on top of my darker base. I have just adjusted the color a little bit, so everything's not quite so washed out. And again, just trying to fill everything in, make the hair and fur look full on the dog, making the passes one at a time where I'm adding layers. And then I really start to detail out the curly parts of the hair of this dog along the chest and the belly here, and along the bottom edges of the dog's fur. And again, working in more of the liner brush along the face, adding in some of those individual hair details that you can see along the cheeks and along the edges of the face, around the nose. A little bit more detailed work with a liner brush when it comes to the face itself. And then I'm also using this liner brush on these individual hairs along the top of the head. The liner brush is also what I'm using here at this point to create these curlier hair details along the bottom here of the edges of the dog's fur, extending some of these individual hairs out along the darker background. I would say at this point that this particular dog with its coloration has been the one that I had to go back and forth on the most in terms of trying to get it to look right, based off of the source photos that I had. I had not met this dog really in person to know exactly what kind of fur I was dealing with. All I had was these source images to go with. So I'm continuing to work now again with that liner brush, creating all these little hair details along the feet and along the bottom of the chest and the belly of the dog here, where you can see individual little hairs that are curled up and turned in different directions, just trying to create as much detail as I can. Now I'm starting to bring in a little bit of a shadow underneath the dog of where it is sitting on this floor, just to add to the realism to it, to make it look like the dog is indeed sitting on the floor, and it's got a little bit of a shadow underneath it. That's all I'm really doing at this point. A couple of adjustments of the color here one last time, where I said, it's just, I don't know, there's a little bit more of a creamier gray color. So again, I used a glaze here where I really thinned the paint out, basically painted it right over the color that I had there. And then one last time taking my liner brush to add the lighter fur highlights in and back over the top of that glazed, darker, creamier color that I put in. It was that final pass there that I was finally kind of happy with the way it turned out. So this is pretty much the finished product of a dog named Lily. She was again a little bit of a challenge here for me. I had to go back several times, but ultimately I arrived at this point where I was pretty happy with the finished product. The dog's fur was about the right coloration. Again, it's kind of tricky because her hair would get lighter as it got longer in the tips of the hair, but you could still see that creamier color underneath. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Give me a thumbs up and a like and a subscribe if you want to see some future videos. Until next time, happy painting, everybody.